The wind was cold, even though the sun still hung in the purple sky. Jace walked alone through the edge of the dead forest, his boots crushing dry leaves and broken bones. Everyone said the forest was cursed. Locals told stories of monstrous creatures that hunted by scent, sound, and fear, and those who entered never came back. But Jace had no choice. He was a scavenger, and this was the only place left with old tech and supplies. He just wanted to find something valuable, then leave fast. But then he heard it, a scream, high and sharp, echoing through the trees. It wasn't a beast's roar. It sounded like a child. Jace stopped, heart pounding. He turned toward the sound, even though his brain told him to run the other way. It came again, this time clearer, closer, more desperate. A scream for help, and then sobbing. He moved quickly, but quietly. Keeping his knife ready in one hand, the trees grew thicker, the light dimmer, and strange red vines hung low from the branches. He followed the sound, stepping over twisted roots and fallen trunks. Then he saw something strange, a small escape pod, half buried in the dirt, its side crushed by a large root. Smoke rose from a broken panel, and the hatch was wide open. There was blood on the metal, dark and dry. Jace's breath caught in his throat. He approached slowly, knife raised. Inside the pod were signs of a struggle, claw marks, torn seats, and one lifeless alien body slumped over. But the scream hadn't come from that one. Then he heard whimpering, soft and weak, behind the pod. He stepped around it and froze. Two small alien children, twins, sat huddled together in the dirt. They had pale blue skin, wide glowing eyes, and tiny horns on their foreheads. One was clutching the other, who was bleeding from the leg. They looked up at him with fear, ready to run. But they didn't have the strength. "It's okay," Jace said softly, lowering his blade. "I won't hurt you." The older twin blinked, then whispered something in a strange language. Jace couldn't understand it, but the tone was pleading. He knelt down, reaching slowly. The injured twin flinched, but the other nodded slightly, allowing him to help. Suddenly, a low growl came from the shadows behind the trees. Jace's body tensed. Another growl answered. Then another, 3, maybe 4 different beasts. The forest had smelled blood, and the hunters were near. "Stay behind me," Jace said sharply, drawing his long blade and stepping in front of the twins. The first monster came crashing through the trees. It had 6 legs, rows of yellow teeth, and spiked armor down its back. It hissed when it saw Jace, then charged. Jace waited, then moved fast, slashing sideways as the beast lunged. His blade cut deep into its neck, and it fell, twitching. But more were coming. He could hear them, smell them, feel the ground shake. The twins cried out, terrified. Jace looked down at them, then at the path behind the pod. There was no time to think. He scooped both of them into his arms and ran. He didn't know where he was going, just away from the screams and howls, growing louder. The forest was a maze, but he had good instincts. He jumped over roots, slid under branches, and dodged hanging vines. Behind him, the beasts followed, shrieking and snarling. One caught up, leaping from a tree. Jace spun and stabbed upward, his blade slicing through its belly. It screamed and fell, but he didn't stop. His arms ached from carrying the twins, but he didn't let go. Finally, he saw a rocky hill ahead, covered in moss and bone. A cave, maybe small, maybe deep. He didn't care. He rushed inside, placed the twins in a corner, and turned to face the entrance. A third beast followed, crawling low like a serpent. Jace threw a rock, hitting it in the eye. Then he grabbed a fallen tree limb and smashed it over the monster's head until it stopped moving. The cave was dark, but quiet for now. The twins were crying softly, huddled together again. Jace sat down near them, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm. He didn't come to save anyone. He came for tech and scrap. But now, with 2 frightened alien children depending on him, he made a choice. He would not let them die here. Not while he still had a blade. Not while he could still fight. And not while there were monsters left to kill. The night crept in fast, dark and heavy. The forest outside the cave groaned as strange. Creatures moved through the trees. Jace sat by the entrance, his back against the stone. Blade in hand, his other hand pressed against the bite on his shoulder. It wasn't deep, but it burned like fire. The twins were curled up in the far corner, huddled under Jace's old cloak. They hadn't spoken since the last scream. The younger one cried in his sleep. Jace didn't blame them. They had seen death, monsters, blood, and fire all in a single hour. He kept thinking about the first kill. The way the beast had lunged, the way its blood splashed warm across his chest. He had fought before raiders, bandits, wild dogs, but this was different. That thing hadn't felt fear. It wanted to tear and eat. Nothing more. Jace shifted, trying to stay awake. He couldn't sleep. Not yet. There were more out there, and they knew where he was. They had smelled the children's blood. And they were patient. Suddenly, a twig snapped. Jace froze. Eyes locked on the mouth of the cave. A low growl echoed from outside, followed by heavy breathing. Then another growl, from a different direction. They were circling. Jace stood up, body tense. He moved a rock closer to the entrance and stood. Behind it, hiding the twins, a second later. The first beast stepped into the opening. Its black eyes shimmered in the moonlight, and its long claws clicked on the stone floor. It sniffed the air, growled, then took a step forward. Jace didn't. Wait. He leaped out, slashing hard. The blade cutting deep into the beast's side. It screamed, but Jace didn't stop. He kicked its leg, drove the blade into its neck, and twisted until it stopped moving. Another one came right behind it. Jaws open, Jace grabbed the dead one's body and shoved it forward, blocking the next attacker. Then he stabbed low, catching the second beast under its arm. It thrashed and clawed his chest, but Jace shoved it back and finished it. The twins screamed, but he shouted, "Stay down." He didn't have time to check them. He turned just in time to see a third creature crawl across the wall like a spider, its mouth open sideways, teeth dripping with black slime. Jace threw a stone, hitting it in the eye. The thing hissed and jumped down, but Jace was ready. He ducked, sliced upward, and split it open across the belly. It fell beside the other bodies. Twitching, Jace panted, sweat pouring down his face. He looked at the pile 3 monsters, dead, but the growls didn't stop. They were testing him, watching him, waiting for him to slow down. He dragged the dead beasts to the mouth of the cave and stacked them like a wall. Their bodies smelled strong, maybe strong enough to hide the children's scent, maybe just enough to buy them time. The twins were quiet again, watching him with wide eyes. He sat beside them, blood covering his arms and face. He didn't say anything, and neither did they, but one of them reached out and touched his leg gently. Jace didn't move, but something in his chest shifted. He wasn't just fighting for his life now. He was fighting for theirs. The next day came slowly. With a dull gray light creeping into the cave, Jace hadn't slept. The beasts hadn't attacked again, but he knew they hadn't left. He stood and stretched, wincing at the cuts and bruises. Then he looked at the twins. They needed food, water, and medicine. They wouldn't last another night like this. He made a choice. He would leave the cave during the day hunt, find supplies, and return before dark. He showed the twins how to hide, how to stay silent. Then he marked the path outside with small rocks so he could return fast. The forest was quiet, but it wasn't empty. He moved carefully, watching every shadow, listening to every sound. He found an old escape crate half buried in vines. Inside was a medkit, dried food, and a small pulse pistol. He almost smiled. Luck. Finally, on the way back, he heard movement behind him. He turned slowly, hand on his blade, 4 monsters following him, tracking him. He didn't run. Instead, he lured them away from the cave, toward a ravine he'd spotted earlier. When they charged, he jumped across the narrow gap. One tried to follow and fell. Crashing down into the darkness, the others hesitated, giving him time to shoot one with the pistol. It screeched and rolled down the rocks. The last 2 turned and ran. Smart ones. Jace returned to the cave, bloody and limping, but alive. The twins ran to him. Grabbing his arms, he smiled weakly. "Still here," he whispered. "Still fighting." Jace's breath came in short, rough gasps as he dropped the supplies inside the cave. His legs were shaking, his arm bruised and burned, but his eyes stayed sharp. The twins rushed to him, their small hands trying to help. They spoke in soft, alien words, ones he couldn't understand. But their faces showed everything: fear, hope, and trust. He handed them the food. They ate quietly, sharing every bite, even though they were starving. Jace watched them while checking his wounds. The bandages from the medkit helped, but they couldn't fix everything. He'd lost too much blood, and he didn't know how long. He could keep fighting. The cave was no longer enough. They needed real shelter, something better, something stronger. That's when he had an idea. It was crazy, but so was everything else around him. He would build a wall, not with wood, not with stone, but with the bodies of the monsters he had killed. It would hide their scent, confuse other beasts, and mark this cave as claimed. He dragged the heavy corpses to the mouth of the cave. He stacked them, head to head, bone to bone. The stench was thick, but it didn't bother him anymore. What mattered was keeping the twins alive. By the end, the cave entrance looked like the jaws of a beast. Bones pointed outward, dark claws crossed like blades. No ordinary creature would come close now. Jace stepped back, breathing hard, staring. At his creation, it was ugly, terrifying, but it was theirs. A shelter made of bones. The twins stared in silence. Then one of them whispered a word. Jace didn't know the meaning, but it sounded like home. The forest was quieter after that. Either the beasts sensed danger, or they believed the cave was already taken. But Jace knew better. The peace wouldn't last. That night, the younger twin coughed badly. His wound was infected, the leg swollen and hot. Jace dug through the medkit again, searching for anything useful. He found a vial with glowing blue liquid Dalian medicine. Maybe. No label, no instructions, just a hope. He looked at the boy, then at the older twin. "Hold him," Jace said softly. Then he injected the liquid near the wound. The boy screamed, twisting in pain. The blue liquid spread under the skin like lightning. Then, slowly, the heat faded, and the swelling began to go down. Jace leaned back, exhausted. It worked. Maybe. Just maybe. They had a chance. In the morning, he explored deeper into the cave. He found something strange: markings on the walls, old alien symbols carved deep into the stone. It wasn't just a cave. It had once been a shelter, maybe even a temple. There were bones stacked neatly in one corner, long turned to dust, and in the back, behind a hidden stone slab, he found a glowing stone, small, warm, and humming with energy. He took it back to the front. As soon as he placed it near the twins, the air changed, the cold faded, and the cave felt warmer, safer. Even the smell of the monster corpses outside seemed to grow weaker. "Looks like this place wants to help us," Jace muttered. He didn't understand the stone, but he wasn't going to question it. Sometimes, you just take the gift and move forward. The twins started calling him something new, Sharanak. He didn't know what it meant, but the way they said it made him feel like it was a good thing, like protector. maybe, or guardian. He didn't ask. He just nodded every time and kept sharpening his blade. Later that day, he went outside for water. He followed a dried stream that curved through thick vines. There, he found a pool, still and untouched. He drank and filled the containers, but on the way back, he saw the footprints, huge, deep claw marks, much larger than anything he had fought. They circled the area, sniffed the air, then turned back toward the deeper forest. Jace froze, heart thudding. Something bigger was coming, something that wasn't afraid of the smell of death. Back at the cave, he placed sharpened spikes in the ground. He rigged vines as traps, rocks as alarms. The twins helped in small ways, moving pebbles, gathering branches. They weren't warriors, but they were trying, and Jace felt a strange pride swelling inside him that night. As the wind howled and the stars blinked above the trees, Jace sat outside the cave, between the twins and the wild. The bone wall glowed faintly in the moonlight. The glowing stone pulsed behind him. He whispered to himself, "We'll survive this, not for money, not for honor, but because they needed him." And he refused to let anything take them, not while he could breathe, not while he could bleed, and not while he had a blade in his hand. Jace had seen many beasts, but this was different. It started with silence, the kind that made your skin crawl. Even the wind stopped. The trees stood still, like they were afraid to breathe. Jace was outside the cave, sharpening a new spear. The twins were asleep behind the wall of bones. Then he heard its heavy, slow footsteps, one after another. The ground trembled beneath them. He stood up quickly, heart pounding. He grabbed his blade and turned toward the forest. Something massive was moving between the trees. Not running, not hiding, just walking, like it owned the world. A long shadow stretched across the forest floor. Then he saw it. The beast was taller than any tree nearby. Its back curved like a mountain, covered in green moss and broken horns. Its eyes glowed gold, deep and angry. Fangs longer than Jace's. Sword poked from its jaw. Its arms dragged on the ground with claws like stone axes. He had heard the stories. Locals whispered about it in hushed voices. They called it the mother of the forest, the first beast, the one that birthed the others in the dark. Jace backed toward the cave. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. The creature sniffed the air. Its head turned, and its golden eyes locked. Onto him, the bone wall was no protection against that thing. He had to lead it away. He whispered into the cave, "Don't move, don't make a sound." Then he ran. He ran straight into the woods, crashing through vines and branches. The beast roared a sound that shook birds from trees miles away. It followed him, tearing through the forest like a storm. Jace didn't stop. He remembered the ravine where he had tricked the other monsters. If he could just reach it, maybe he could do the same again. But the mother was smarter, faster, and angry. She closed the distance quickly. Trees falling behind her. Jace jumped across the ravine, rolled, and turned. But the beast didn't leap. It stopped at the edge, sniffed the air, and began circling. "She's not just hunting," Jace whispered. "She's thinking." He had to change the plan. There was one more option, an old mine shaft nearby. He had seen it before, collapsed long ago. But it went deep underground. If he could lure her in and trap her inside. He ran again, leading her to the mine. She roared louder, the sound shaking the trees. Jace reached the shaft, breath ragged, body burning. He climbed down the old ladder and waited in the dark. The beast paused at the opening, sniffing again. Then she followed, claws scraping against stone. As she squeezed into the narrow tunnel, Jace moved deeper. He grabbed old explosives he had seen on his last visit in stable, but still usable. He waited until she was halfway in. Then he lit the fuse. Smoke filled the tunnel. Fire roared, rocks crumbled. Jace threw himself into a side chamber as the mine collapsed. Everything went dark. Dust choked the air. The ground shook one last time, then stopped. Silence, again. But this time, it felt like peace. Jace coughed and pushed himself up. The chamber had protected him, barely. He was bruised, cut, and burned, but alive. He climbed out through a narrow tunnel that led to the surface. When he emerged, the sky was turning orange. Dawn. He looked back toward the mine. Smoke still rose from the sealed entrance. There was no sound from within. The mother of the forest was gone. He limped back to the cave, legs weak, clothes torn. The twins saw him and ran to him. They were shaking, tears in their eyes. But when they touched him and felt he was real, alive, they smiled. Jace dropped to his knees, pulled them into a hug. "We're okay," he whispered. "She's gone." That night, there were no growls, no glowing eyes in the dark, just quiet, the kind that lets you sleep. Jace lay back against the cave wall. He looked at the stars through the bone gate. He had faced the worst the forest had to offer, and survived. But he knew it wasn't over. There were still more monsters out there. More threats beyond the trees, and he wasn't done protecting them yet. Not until they were safe. Not until they could laugh again, and not until he was sure they would never be hunted again. Jace didn't sleep that night. His body rested, but his eyes never closed. He sat outside the bone gate, watching the forest. The mother of the forest was gone, buried beneath stone and fire. But the land still felt heavy, like something was holding its breath. The twins were inside, curled against each other. Safe, warm, quiet. Jace had given them hope, but the fight had changed him. His arms were covered in cuts, some deep, some still bleeding. His back ached from falling rocks, and one of his ribs felt cracked. But what hurt the most was his right leg. It had stopped responding. He had dragged it the last half-mile to reach the cave. Now it was swollen and dark purple. He knew he couldn't run anymore. He couldn't fight like before. And they still weren't safe the next day. He woke to the sound of the older twin tugging at his arm. The younger one pointed toward the sky. Smoke, a ship trail, far in the distance, cutting across the orange clouds. It was a signal beacon. Jace remembered the rescue systems built into most escape pods. If the twins' pod had activated it, someone might be coming. Maybe their people. Maybe worse, they had to move. They couldn't wait here and hope. Jace packed what little they had: one medkit, dried food, a half-charged pulse pistol, and a blade. Then he tried to stand. His leg gave out. He fell hard against the bone wall. Gasping, the twins ran to him, panic in their voices. He waved them off gently. "I'm okay," he lied, but he wasn't. Still, he had to move. He tore part of his cloak and tied his leg tight. Then he picked up the younger twin and nodded to the older. "We go," he said. "No other choice." They followed a path that climbed toward the ridge. That's where the smoke trail led. Every step burned. Every breath felt like knives in his chest. The twins stayed close, their small hands gripping his shirt. When he fell, they tried to pull him up. When he bled, they wiped it away. It wasn't fast, but they moved. Inch by inch, hour by hour, through the forest. Past monster bones, over fallen trees, until the sky began to darken again. They stopped near a broken bridge and old alien structure covered in vines. On the other side, they saw it, a tall metal tower. Glowing faintly, the rescue beacon, the source of the signal. Jace smiled through bloodied lips. They were close, but he knew what was waiting. The tower pulsed with strange energy. And around it, in the trees, shadows moved. Not beasts like before. These were twisted, darker. Their skin shimmered like oil, their limbs too long. They were drawn to the signal, too. Jace sat the younger twin down. He looked at both of them and pointed toward the tower. "You run," he said. "You hide inside." They shook their heads, scared, but he gave them a firm look. No arguments. He stood between them and the shadows, pulse pistol in one hand, blade in the other. He could barely stand straight, but he wouldn't let them pass him. The first creature stepped out of the trees. It had no eyes, only a mouth that opened side to side. Jace fired, the beam slicing its chest open. It fell, twitching. Then the rest came. 10, 15, 20. Jace moved like a machine. Each shot. A scream of pain through his arm. When the pistol ran dry, he used the blade. Each swing cost him blood, but he didn't stop. He was fighting with nothing left, just rage, love, and the promise he had made. One creature got through and charged. The twins' Jace leaped and slammed into it, driving them both over the edge of the ridge. He hit the ground hard. Everything went white, then black. When he woke, the sky was full of light. A ship hovered above the tower, doors open, weapons drawn. And there on the ramp stood a tall female alien in armor, eyes wide with fury. The twins ran to her, shouting in their language. She dropped her weapon, pulled them into her arms, and then looked down the hill. At Jace, he lay broken, blood pooling around him. Skin burned and torn, but he smiled. The children were safe. That was enough. She came down slowly. Kneeling beside him, her voice shook, her eyes wet with something like tears. She pressed her forehead to his chest and whispered a word that echoed deep in the ship's translator. Family. Asterisk. Jace opened his eyes slowly. Bright, white light made him blink. For a moment, he thought he was dead, but the pain said otherwise. He lay on a soft bed, inside a ship. Clean walls, warm air, strange sounds around him. The hum of engines, the beep of machines. He tried to move, but his body refused. His arms were wrapped, chest covered in healing gel, and his right leg was gone, cut clean below the knee. Replaced with a metal Lemalian tech, lightweight, smooth, and strong. The door slid open, and the alien mother walked in. Her armor was off, replaced with a simple dark robe. Her eyes locked on his. She didn't speak right away. She placed a hand on his chest, above his heart. "You saved my children," she whispered. "I owe you more than words." Jace tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Are they safe?" She nodded. "They're sleeping, dreaming of you." He leaned back, breath shaky. He had made it. They were safe, but peace didn't last. Not here, not yet. Hours later, alarms began to blare across the ship. The alien mother returned, now armored. Again, her face tight. She looked down at him. "We're under attack," she said. The beasts followed the signal. Jace tried to sit up. His body screamed in pain, but he didn't stop. "Take off," he said. "Fly away." She shook her head slowly. "The ship can't lift," she said. "The engine's still cooling from re-entry." Outside, the monsters came like a storm. Hundreds of them, twisted, unnatural, clawed, and fanged. They had sensed the children, the life, the warmth. Now they wanted to tear it apart. Jace stood slowly, leg unsteady, but strong. He grabbed his blade, now reforged with alien steel. He turned to the mother. "I'll hold them," he said. "You can't stand," she whispered. "You'll die." "I've died before," Jace said. "This time I do it standing." He stepped out of the ship, the twins watching from the ramp. They didn't cry this time. They just pressed their hands to their hearts and whispered Shironic. "Protector." The ground trembled as the beasts came. Jace stood alone, a single man against a sea of monsters. The first wave hit, and he moved like fire. His new leg gave him speed, balance, power. His blade tore through flesh. His hands didn't. Stop. Each kill bought another second, another breath for the ones behind him. He counted in his head. 1, 5, 12, 50. His arms bled, his lungs burned, but he didn't fall. The beasts screamed. Their bodies piled at his feet. Still they came. Still he fought. One of them bit his shoulder, tearing deep. Jace roared, grabbed its jaw, and broke it with bare hands. 70, 90, 100 behind him. The ship glowed, engines warming, but they needed more time. He charged, forcing the beasts back. He used their fear, their confusion, their hunger against them. He stabbed low. Swung high, rolled between them, a creature slashed his side. He stabbed it through the eye. 150, 200. 260. He was limping, his chest soaked in blood, his metal leg sparking. But he didn't stop. Not for pain, not for fear. The final wave came, faster, meaner, angrier. 300 bodies now lay around him, and he stood in the center, covered in scars, eyes full of fire. The last beast, a massive one with black wings, charged him. Jace roared, ran forward, and leaped. He stabbed it through the neck as it crushed him beneath its weight. Silence, smoke. Then the ship's engines roared. From the deck above, the alien mother watched with shaking hands. Her children clutched her robe. Tears in their eyes. Below, in the field of blood and broken bones, the monsters were gone. And in the center, Jace's body didn't move, but his blade still stuck out of the last beast's neck. Even in death, he had won. The ship rose into the sky, leaving behind a grave of monsters, and one man who fought them all. For 2 children, for a promise, for something more than survival. The ship flew through quiet skies. Stars stretched like rivers above. But no one on board looked up. Everyone's eyes were on the 2 small alien children sitting in silence. And the blade wrapped in cloth resting between them. The blade was cracked, bent near the hilt, and still stained with blood, but they clutched it like treasure. It was all they had left of him. Jace hadn't moved after the final fight. His body lay beneath the crushed beast, his hand still gripping the blade's handle. The alien mother had pulled him free, tears running down her face. She had whispered something in her language and kissed his forehead. Then, gently, she closed his eyes. He had saved her children. He had faced the impossible, and now she owed him everything back. On the homeworld, the sky was gold and soft. A planet of tall trees, glowing rivers, and singing winds. The people of her race gathered in silence as the ship landed. Word had spread before they arrived. Sharnak, they said. The guardian, the alien mother, stepped out first. She wore a black robe and carried Jace's blade across both hands. The twins walked beside her, heads lowered, and behind them 1,000 warriors stood in silence. She led them to the Hall of Fire, a sacred place where only the most honored were remembered. No outsider had ever been named there, but today a human would be the first. The ritual began with silence, then music soft, slow, and made from wind chimes and hollow drums. The alien mother placed the blade on the altar. She raised her voice, strong and clear. He came from the stars with nothing, she said. He left behind everything. She touched the scars on her own arm. These are mine, she said, but he gave me new ones. Deeper ones snatched into my soul. She turned to the twins. His blood runs with you now. She whispered, you will speak his name every sunrise. The older twin stepped forward and held up a small stone. One Jace had carried since the forest. It still pulsed with faint light. The child placed it on the blade, and it fused like fire and water. A glow spread through the sword, and it was sealed in memory forever. Later, in the quiet of the night, the alien mother sat alone. A fire burned in front of her, its flames blue and calm. She looked up as a shadow approached an elder of her people. He had deep gray skin and long silver horns. You have named him Blood, the elder said. Is this your heart's decision? She nodded. He fought for us when no one else would. She said, he gave his body, his fire, and his final breath to protect our young. He did not ask for reward, but I will give him one." The elder placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then give it," he said, "and let your line be stronger for it the next day." The mother knelt before the council. She spoke the ancient words. "I offer my name, my house, my heart. I offer it to the memory of the human called Jace." A silence followed, long and deep. Then, one by one, the council members lowered their heads, accepted. From that day on, Jace was known not just as Sharanek, but as Father of Flame, protector of the young, and husband of the House of Calther. A statue was raised, carved from the bones of the beasts he had slain, his likeness scarred, brave, and holding the broken blade stood tall at the city's gate. Children left flowers at his feet. Warriors touched his hand before battle, and songs were sung, not of his death, but of his will, his strength, his heart. The twins grew up under the protection of his name. They trained with the blade, learned human words, and kept his stories alive. The older one spoke boldly, the younger with quiet fire. Together, they became defenders, guardians like him and the alien mother. She never took another mate, but every night, she sat by the garden where Jace's ashes were buried. She would whisper stories of the stars, of the cave made of bones, of the scream in the forest, and the man who answered it. One night, many years later, a bright star flashed across the sky. The twins, now warriors, looked up and smiled. The older one said, "He's watching us." The younger nodded, "And he's proud." In the garden, the flame on the small memorial stone flickered softly. A breeze passed through the trees, warm and gentle, like a hand on the shoulder, like a whisper in the dark. And in that moment, the whole planet seemed to remember him. Not as a stranger, not as a soldier, but as family.